SXTA dígla so cheasmat loa cheasmat ocho achwasuk watis. Don't give it to anybody else.
Tilla Gutierrez had told us that she remembers as a young girl that the chiefs would get together and meet here and discuss what was called the land question. And she said that before each meeting they would always start off with the opening statement, meaning this is our land, we have to take care of everything that belongs to us.
This is SXTA. This is our land. We've been asking the government, how did they get ownership of the land? That is our question. To our young people, this is only the beginning. You need to listen, to learn, to carry on the work, because this is your future.
The Creator, in his wisdom, decided to take certain people and make an example out of them. And so throughout the nation, you have these stone figures which represent rules or values that we have actually now in stone. And our Constitution has always been here then. Our rules of conduct, our rules of behavior, and the way that we think, our moral values. And they've actually situated around the Stalo Nation. And they not only define our nation, but they define how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. So, yeah.
My father was very involved in the land question. I've heard since I was a kid, and that was 60 years ago.
There are 5 main lands issues at the Xwexwilmexw Treaty table. Xwexwilmexw lands, shared decision-making over land and resources, land use planning, resource revenue sharing, constitutional protection of Xwexwilmexw lands. The purpose of Xwexwilmexw lands is to identify lands within the territory over which Xwexwilmexw people and government will have the highest level of jurisdiction, authority, and lawmaking power.
The land question and the resolution of the land question is a very important and probably the most important aspect of the treaty. Land for First Nations people is vital. In order for First Nations to progress in today's society, they need to have a land base. History has proven that the land has been the First Nations people's supermarket. It's been their medicine source, their pharmacy, if you will. It's been their playground. It's been their educational area. It's been their work area. Without an adequate land base, First Nations would not be able to regain their place in the world for the benefit of their community. So the treaty, in my opinion, must have an adequate land-based component in order for a treaty to be successful. And we're talking about successful for eternity for First Nations communities.
Most important issue is having the land. Our community at Xweluk is very small, and most of the land that we have is on floodplain, so there's not a lot of development that can happen. It has held up the process of us being able to provide housing to our members. Most of our members live in urban areas, and also it limits very much economic development in our communities.
The most important issue is on land that we don't really have enough. The band only owns 10 acres in reserve land. And that's not much for our band to do anything with. The other landowners is myself and my nephew and a son and niece, and it's spread out too thin.
We have over 1.3 million hectares of land in SXTA. Nowadays, the reserves of all Stalo together add up to 12,500 hectares, less than 1% of our territory. Of that, the land area of SXTA reserves adds up to only 1,650 hectares, about 1/10 of 1% of SXTA. On the other hand, the Crown Government claims more than 75% of our territory, mainly as provincial land, most of which is located in the mountainous watersheds surrounding the Fraser Valley.
It's title and rights that we're really working on, trying to identify land that that is available for the treaty table. Like I mentioned earlier, that there's very little land that's available for treaty settlement. But what we're trying to do as a Xwexwilmexw tribe is to get land up where our ancestors came from, and that was Xwexwilmexw Lake, and there's a lot of crown land up there, provincial land. We wanted to buy land that was for sale. We wanted to approach the government or the provincial government and the treaty table. Any land that's for sale, like farmland or anything, give us the money now to buy it.
The purpose of shared decision-making is to preserve, protect, restore and enhance our territory and environment as part of our stewardship responsibility within Saahtamuk. Having decision-making power over the use of land and resource throughout our territory is critical to protecting our traditional and contemporary way of life. We will negotiate how to share decision-making powers with others. By not having control over our lands at the community level, the community loses out on economic opportunities that could potentially address a lot of the social issues that we are plagued with by being under the restrictive covenants of Indian affairs.
The Indian Act is a piece of legislation that is antiquated, outdated, has draconian measures in it, and needs to change. And the treaty will move us away from the Indian Act. The Indian Act has put in place measures that essentially have suffocated First Nations' ability to progress in many areas, in many components, not the least of which is the development of land, the ability to utilize the land that has been identified in these puny little reserves that were created many, many years ago. It is impossible for us to achieve our goal under a regime that includes the Indian Act.
The land question and treaty is very, very important because it establishes our original territory, and it allows the freedom of our people to utilize the territory in the same means that our ancestors did. A lot of it is going to change because of the fact that now you have the impact of society. It's all around us, and especially in particular for us as Stalo people, society is really encroached on all of us, and it makes it very, very difficult in the land question because they've taken a lot off the table that they don't even allow us to negotiate for. So, we've already started in kind of, I would say, a very difficult position.
The fact that lands are being bought and sold around us, the fact that the lands which we once cared for as our own are being stripped of resources, and our small parcels of reserve lands remain undeveloped, and the control over these lands is still in the hands of Indian affairs. About 285,000 hectares, or 21%, of Saahtamuk land is now designated as fee simple or privately owned. The local development of lands and 20th century urban expansion moving eastward from Vancouver has surrounded and isolated our reserves, our villages, homes and families.
The Indian Act has minimized our ability to do anything on the land. My opinion of the Indian Act is that they have given us what was left over, what wasn't productive land, to the settlers that came here, and if there's any mineral rights or minerals or any kind of resources that are found on our land, the government tries to find a way to access it without the First Nations or the communities benefiting from it.
Shared decision-making complements land selection and land use planning. Developing a shared decision-making process extends Xwexwilmexw governance and authority throughout Saahtamuk, beyond what will be identified as Xwexwilmexw lands. Developing a Stalo land use plan for the territory as a whole will provide us with a way of representing Saahtamuk to others from our point of view. Through shared decision-making and a Stalo land use plan, we can protect, preserve, and enhance our connection to the territory as a whole, while recognizing different levels of governance, jurisdiction, and collective relations with our Stalo relatives and non-Aboriginal neighbors. The purpose of land use planning is to create a plan of land and resources within Saahtamuk, which is created by and acceptable to the Stalo, recognizing our cultural heritage and unique needs and connections to our world. Mapping our territory for land uses will define the relationship between our development and conservation needs. A comprehensive Stalo land use plan will provide us with a way of dealing with development issues within our territory.
We lived off the land. We had to do all the gathering. We didn't have refrigerators, so you had to gather everything that you needed to survive. And we lived absolutely off the land. And you know, to try to express that in today's life is sometimes hard because young people never really had that kind of an impact. They've never had really look at how the land could take care of them. And I'm very, very fortunate I had that opportunity. I had the opportunity that I know how the land could take care of us. If any of our people could really go back and understand how the mountains, the trees, all the plants and the animals could really take care of us in a day-to-day life, they would have a different way of looking at this world, I believe.
Access to land is essential for treaty resolution, but as well, the degradation and destruction of land has been a big issue and a major concern for First Nations people. As history has proven, the use of the lands for many purposes, for education, for health, for spiritual wellness, for the economy, for using for the lands and resources for teaching and for the playground for First Nations. In order to protect the territory and to move forward in it, it has to be clearly understood that this is important to First Nations, that the treaty is going to protect it.
Our approach to land use planning balances conservation and development needs, with a primary concern for protecting and preserving our heritage and identity. This land use plan will represent Stalo values and can be used in many ways to guide development within South Tamuk, within a treaty-based shared decision-making process, or more immediately through the consultation and accommodation process. As it stands, 20% of South Tamuk is designated parkland. 46% is operable forestry area within the Fraser Timber Supply Area. 25% of South Tamuk, including nearly all the lands in the valley bottom, is now used for residential, commercial, industrial, or agricultural purposes. Municipalities govern over 24%, or 321,000 hectares, of our traditional land base. The Stalo have had no say in planning the way South Tamuk has come to be used by our neighbors, those with whom we now share our land and resources. Many pipelines, highways, and power lines run through our territory as well as through our specific reserves. Our rivers have been diverted, our lakes have been drained. With our lands and resources, our heritage and identity at stake, the status quo is not acceptable.
Planning ahead to our future generations is our main issue. Like the teachings our people left us, you plan 7 generations ahead, and then you try to learn your history 7 generations in the past.
Resource revenue sharing is for the Xwexwilmexw to receive revenues from the extraction of resources and land transactions carried out within South Tamuk. Discussions of revenue sharing include gaining a percentage of a wide range of charges, including stumpage fees, land tenure fees, leases and licenses, and permit fees. Resource revenue sharing relates to discussions of the sharing of lands and resources that historically go back to the Crown's promise of 1864. At the Queen's birthday celebration of 1864, held in New Westminster, Governor Seymour and representatives of the Crown Government promised to share resource revenues with the Aboriginal peoples of British Columbia.
My Indian friends, I am glad to see you and to find that so many have come down to show their loyalty to our Queen. Sir James Douglas, the first governor of the colony of British Columbia, made a promise to you Indians in his first surveying of the land. He said that he informed the natives they would not be disturbed in the possession of their village sites, and that they are at liberty to hunt over the unoccupied lands and to carry on their fisheries with the same freedom as when they were the sole occupants of the country. He promised to keep the white settlers off native land unless it was first purchased from you Indians. Land which is taken away from the Indians will be like a fruit tree And from this said fruit, Her Majesty Queen Victoria will give it to the Indians for their lasting support. That is to say, the benefits from that land will come to you as well as to the white man. You shall receive 25 cents on every dollar raised from your land.
Xwexwilmexw lands will be protected under Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution. The purpose of our negotiations is to develop a form of land title that recognizes a unique nature of Stalo title. These lands will be uniquely described as Stalo lands and will not be granted from the Crown.
The Xwexwilmexw Treaty Association is, through a treaty process, is trying to achieve certainty and clarity around the access and use of and benefit of land in their traditional territories. It's something that will eventually develop not only respect but also to compliance with what First Nations are going to be doing in their territory and how it's going to relate to other uses in the territory. The treaty will entrench in the Constitution those uses, those benefits, and the access to the territory and to the lands. And, you know, the essential requirements of land in order for a community to be successful has to be understood, has to be protected by law, and has to be adequate in order for a First Nations community to survive and move forward. And this is for eternity, not for 10 years, 20 years, but for eternity.
We are currently exploring ways of registering constitutionally protected Section 35 Xwexwilmexw lands.
The land question, to me, it's a two-part question because in our position, the land question comes down to us defining really what area that belongs to us as the Stalo people. And that's not always the same position that the government takes when they have their land question. Their land question is mainly to kind of keep us isolated and out of their way so that they can carry on doing what they're doing. So their land question is a lot different than ours.
We're not just going to take what they're offering, we're going to keep going till we get what we want, and that is recognition of our Aboriginal rights and title to our territory.
Treaty is our future.
Protection for what little resources we have left, improving rights that we don't have, and protecting rights that we do have of our people. Hey, 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 every week we're so unstable, but I see the light deep in your eyes. I see your fight, and now it's your time to shine. 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 Your time to shine.
Has a lot to do with the fact that this is an important fishing ground. Lucky